is silence dark, whispers in the midnight park. The night is cold, there's no escape. Ghostly figures take their shape.
Hello and welcome to Real Talk Horror Edition. If you're a fan of films that get under your skin, twist your perceptions, and leave you pondering, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Josh, and in this series, we're venturing beyond jump scares and gore to explore the terrifying, thought-provoking, and often mind-bending world of psychological horror. Tonight's episode is part of a special series that examined psychological horror through three key lenses. First, we expanded mind games and madness, and then paranoia and the unknown. And now, we're on our last couple episodes, 2 episodes of trauma and transformation. Each lens captures a unique facet of what makes psychological horror resonate so deeply with us. Now, for those of you who've been following along, we've already explored some films like The Babadook and Hereditary, which fall squarely in the realm of trauma and transformation. This is horror that stems not just from external forces, but within ourselves, born of grief, loss, and emotional reckoning. Tonight, we continue that journey with the 6th film in this category, 1408, based on Stephen King's chilling short story. This 2007 adaptation, directed by Mikael Håfström, is a haunting exploration of isolation, grief, and the horrors of a fractured mind. With a screenplay by Matt Greenberg, Scott Alexander, and Larry Karaszewski, 1408 takes us into the heart of psychological terror and leaves us questioning the nature of reality itself. Starring John Cusack as Mike Enslin, a skeptical and emotionally scarred writer who specializes in debunking paranormal phenomena. 1408 flips the script on his cynicism. When he checks into the infamous Dolphin Hotel, he's met with a hotel room that doesn't just haunt, it consumes. What follows is a masterclass in building tension, unraveling the psyche, and confronting unresolved trauma. So settle in, turn the lights down low, and let's step into the confines of 1408. Together, we'll explore the themes, dissect its chilling moments, and uncover why it remains one of the most unsettling psychological horror films of the last couple decades. 1408 is the chilling tale of Mike Enslin, a jaded author whose career revolves around debunking so-called haunted locations. Mike is a man defined by skepticism, his sharp wit and sarcasm shielding him from the world and perhaps from himself. But when he decides to investigate room 1408 at the infamous Dolphin Hotel, he finds himself stepping into something far beyond his usual routine. Despite adamant warnings from the hotel manager Gerald Olin, played masterfully by the great Samuel L. Jackson, Mike insists on staying the night. Olin's ominous advice to avoid the room, backed by its long history of unexplained deaths and disappearances, only fuels Mike's disbelief. But the moment Mike enters 1408, it becomes clear that this room is no ordinary hotel suite. What begins with subtle, eerie occurrences escalates into a nightmarish journey as the room manipulates time, space, and even reality itself. It's not just a physical threat. Room 1408 dives into Mike's psyche, forcing him to confront buried grief and unresolved trauma, particularly surrounding the loss of his daughter. As the walls close in, both literally and figuratively, Mike's skepticism crumbles, replaced by terror and desperation. The question becomes not just whether he can survive the night, but whether he can escape the room's relentless grip on his mind and soul. 1408 is a relentless exploration of fear, loss, and the fragility of the human psyche, making it one of the most gripping entries in psychological horror. 1408 is a real deep dive into the human psyche, delivering horror that transcends the supernatural and strikes at the heart of our most intimate fears. Through its intricate themes and psychological elements, the film transforms a single hotel room into a stage for profound emotional torment. Let's unpack these layers. At its heart, 1408 is a story about the manipulative power of grief and guilt. The Room doesn't just haunt Mike Enslin, it studies him, knows him intimately, and exploits his vulnerabilities. This isn't a generic haunting, it's a targeted assault on Mike's psyche. The Room weaponizes his unresolved pain over the death of his young daughter Katie, dredging up memories he's tried to bury and warping them into instruments of torment. We see this manipulation in moments like the phantom appearances of Katie, her voice calling out to him, or visions of a life that could have been. These aren't just scares, they're deeply personal attacks. They're designed to break Mike emotionally and mentally. The Room forces him to confront the raw, unhealed wound of his loss, transforming his grief into a relentless source of terror. One of the most gripping psychological elements of the film is its blurring of perception and reality. From the moment Mike steps into room 1408, he, and us in the audience, lose any sense of stability. The room defies logic, shifting time and space, creating illusions that feel just real enough to make us question what's actually happening. This is perhaps best exemplified in the scene where Mike appears to escape the room, only to discover he's still trapped in its twisted grasp. By breaking the boundaries between real and imagined, the film keeps us disoriented, mirroring Mike's spiraling descent into madness. The Room's mind games are relentless, and the lack of clear answers heightens the unease, leaving us to wonder, was Mike ever free? Or was it all part of the Room's cruel manipulation? Mike's journey is the emotional backbone of the film. At the outset of 1408, he's a detached skeptic, using his work to keep the world real and his emotions at arm's length. His cynicism is a shield, a way to avoid confronting the pain of his past. But the Room strips away that shield, exposing the raw, vulnerable man beneath. As the night unfolds, we see Mike transform from a man in control to one utterly at the mercy of his own demons. His grief, once compartmentalized, becomes inescapable. John Cusack's performance captures this unraveling beautifully, making Mike's internal struggle as compelling and terrifying as the external horrors of the Room. But maybe the true terror of 1408 lies in its ambiguity. The Room isn't just haunted, it's something far more sinister and unknowable. What is it? A malevolent force? A manifestation of its occupants' minds? The film deliberately avoids giving us any answers, and the ambiguity is its greatest strength. The lack of explanation taps into a primal fear, the fear of the unknown. As humans, we crave understanding, and when we're faced with something inexplicable, our imaginations are forced to fill the void with the worst possibilities. The Room's power lies in its mystery. It doesn't need to explain itself, because its victims, and us, create our own horrors in the absence of answers. I think something that makes 1408 so impactful is how it speaks to universal fears and emotions. Grief, guilt, isolation, and as always, the fragility of the human mind. These are experiences and anxieties that can resonate with all of us on deeply personal levels. The Room becomes a mirror, reflecting not just Mike's pain, but the darkest corners of our own psyches. In the end, 1408 isn't just about a haunted room. It's about the haunting within us all, the unresolved traumas, the questions that linger, and the battles we fight with ourselves. It's this psychological depth that elevates the film, making it a standout in the horror genre, and a deeply affecting exploration of the human condition. The atmosphere and tone of 1408 may be the key to its success as a psychological horror film. They work to create an experience that is disorienting and unnerving for us, just as much as it is for Mike. Every element here, from the cinematography to the sound design, works in concert to make Room 1408 feel not just like a haunted space, but a living and malevolent force. The visual language of 1408 is carefully crafted to heighten the sense of confinement and disorientation. It's this cinematography that employs tight, claustrophobic framing that traps us in the room alongside Mike. As the camera follows his movements, we're pulled into the oppressive atmosphere of the room, with little room to breathe or escape. Shifts in lighting play a pivotal role in mirroring Mike's psychological unraveling. The room initially appears warm and inviting, with soft, golden tones that evoke a false sense of comfort. But as the room begins to reveal its true nature, the lighting shifts dramatically. Harsh, cold blues and sickly, unnatural greens take over, casting shadows that seem to stretch and threaten. These shifts aren't just aesthetic, but psychological, visually charting Mike's descent into madness and despair. The cinematography also uses subtle distortions and unsettling perspectives to enhance the sense of unreality. Mirrors that reflect impossible images, walls that seem to actually close in, and moments where the room itself appears to shift or distort contribute to the feeling that nothing is stable or safe. The sound design in 1408 is integral to creating the tension and unease. It employs unsettling silences, where the absence of sound becomes almost deafening, keeping us on edge as we anticipate the next scare. When sound is used, it's often distorted or exaggerated, with echoes that seem to come from nowhere and noises that build to unbearable crescendos. From the creak of a door to the shattering of glass, every sound is meticulously placed and heighten the sense of isolation and dread. The room's auditory manipulations, the phantom voices, the distorted music, and sudden, jarring noises, they play with Mike's and our senses of reality, and they make it impossible to distinguish what is real and what is being fabricated by the room. Gabriel Yared, his haunting score, adds another layer of emotional depth to the film. The music here isn't overbearing. It's subtle. It's almost whispering in the background. It helps to reinforce Mike's isolation and the room's sinister intent. The score weaves these melancholic themes and unsettling dissonance, underscoring the grief of Mike and the malevolent nature of the room. But the true star here might just be Room 1408 itself. A setting so dynamic and alive it becomes the ultimate antagonist. At first glance, the room appears ordinary, a standard, slightly dated hotel suite. But as the story unfolds, it transforms into a living entity, a force that feeds on fear and despair. The room's decor is oppressive, with dark, heavy furniture and wallpaper that seems to close in on itself. Its layout, initially mundane, begins to shift in ways that defy logic. The walls stretch, the floors vanish, and space itself becomes distorted. The room's ability to expand its boundaries, creating impossible scenarios like endless hallways or vast empty voids, adds to the malevolent otherworldly presence. And I think Room 1408 is so terrifying because of its unpredictability. It doesn't rely on the traditional horror tropes. Instead, it adapts, constantly changing its tactics to exploit Mike's vulnerabilities. One moment, it's suffocatingly small. The next, it's a vast, inescapable void. It really reflects Mike's internal struggles, mirroring his grief, his guilt, and the fractured psyche in its shifting form. And then there's the tone of the film. It's one of unrelenting isolation and despair. From the moment Mike steps into the room, he's cut off, not just physically, but emotionally and psychologically. The room severs his connection to the outside world, leaving him entirely alone with just his fears and his memories. The film doesn't rely on fast-paced action or overt scares. Instead, it builds tension slowly, layering unease upon unease, each moment designed to make us feel as trapped and helpless as Mike, mirroring his growth or his growing realization that there may be no way out, not of the room and not of his own mind. In 1408, the atmosphere and tone create a living nightmare. Every detail, visual, auditory, emotional, it's all meticulously designed to pull us into Mike's experience. The room is a reflection of his deepest fears and regrets. A prison, built not of walls, but of grief, guilt, and dread. And I think it's this attention to atmosphere and tone that really elevates the film from a simple, haunted hotel story to a deeply psychological exploration of terror in the human condition. The psychological intensity of 1408 owes much to its characters, particularly the protagonist, Mike Enslin, and the abstract but deeply menacing antagonist, the room itself. The film's character dynamics, even with such a small cast, are rich with emotional depth and tension, making it a real standout for psychological horror. Beginning with John Cusack as Mike Enslin, he's introduced as a man living in a self-imposed emotional exile. A once promising novelist, he's become jaded and skeptical, specializing in debunking haunted locations for a living. His detachment isn't just professional, it's personal. Beneath his sarcasm and cynicism lies a man crushed by grief, still mourning the death of his daughter, Katie. From the outset, Mike uses his work as a shield, dismissing the supernatural and avoiding emotional vulnerability. His quick wit and biting humor act as a barrier, keeping others and his own pain at bay. But the room sees through his defenses immediately, stripping away the layers of detachment and forcing him to confront his deepest fears and regrets. As the night unfolds, we witness Mike's psyche unravel in heartbreaking detail. The room dredges up painful memories of Katie, presenting visions of her that are both beautiful and cruel. It manipulates his reality, makes him question his sanity, and erodes his skepticism. John Cusack's performance here is notable for his emotional vulnerability. He really captures the progression of a man in control to one who's utterly broken. His breakdown is as much an emotional tragedy as it is a descent into horror, making his struggle deeply relatable, even as it unfolds in an otherworldly setting. And the room itself is one of the more unique antagonists in horror cinema. It has no physical form, no backstory, no clear motive. Instead, it operates as an omnipresent psychological predator, feeding on the fears of its occupants. Its lack of a tangible form makes it all the more terrifying. It's everywhere and nowhere, an inescapable force that knows its victims better than they know themselves. The room's power lies in its adaptability. It doesn't rely on a single method of torment. It shifts its tactics to exploit Mike's vulnerabilities, whether through haunting visions, time distortions, or outright psychological warfare. By targeting Mike's grief over his daughter, the room strikes at the heart of his identity, making its attacks deeply personal and even more devastating. But I think what makes the room even more menacing is just that ambiguity. Is it sentient? Is it a manifestation of its occupant's psyches? The lack of explanation really enhances its mystique. It allows us to project our own fears onto it. This unknowable quality taps into a primal fear of the inexplicable, making the room an antagonist that really lingers in our minds. What would it know about us? And then the supporting cast, particularly Samuel Jackson's portrayal of Gerald Olin, the Dolphin Hotel manager, he provides a crucial counterbalance to Mike's cynicism. Olin is the only character in the film who understands the true nature of room 1408, and his warnings carry a weight of lived experience. In his brief but impactful screen time, Olin conveys a mix of genuine concern, exasperation, and barely concealed fear. Olin's attempt to dissuade Mike from even entering the room serves multiple purposes. On one level, they obviously build suspense and hint at the room's dark history without revealing too much. On another, they establish Olin as a man who has seen the room's horrors firsthand, but is powerless to stop it. His resigned acceptance of the room's existence contrasts sharply with Mike's skepticism, creating a dynamic that adds depth to both characters. Olin also serves as a narrative device. He provides just enough exposition to intrigue the audience without diminishing the room's mystery. His line, typical Sam Jackson kind of line, "It's an evil effing room," encapsulates the terror of 1408 in its simplicity, and it leaves us to imagine horrors even greater than those depicted on screen. Then there's the interplay between Mike, Olin, and the room, and it creates this compelling narrative triad. Olin represents the voice of caution, a man who knows the danger but's unable to prevent others from succumbing to it. Mike, the skeptic, a man who must experience the horror firsthand to believe it. And the room itself, the silent manipulator, orchestrating events with precision and malice. This dynamic helps to enhance the tension and the emotional stakes of the film. Mike's refusal to heed the warnings isn't just a plot device. It's a reflection of his need to prove something, both to himself and to the world. His descent into madness, juxtaposed with Olin's earlier warnings, creates a sense of inevitability that adds to the film's dread. And I think what sets 1408 apart from other horror films is this emotional depth. Mike's struggle isn't just against a supernatural force. It's against his own guilt, his grief, and his inability to let go of the past. The room becomes a metaphor for the prisons we create for ourselves, the memories and emotions we can't escape no matter how hard we try. By the end of the film, Mike is forever changed. Whether he escapes the room physically or not, it's clear that he'll never truly be free of its impact. This lingering emotional resonance is what makes the film such a powerful character study, and it elevates it from a simple haunted house type of story to a profound exploration of the human condition. Now, 1408 is more than a straightforward psychological horror film. It's deeply symbolic exploration of grief, guilt, and the human psyche. Its layers of meaning add richness to the narrative, and it invites us to reflect on the story's broader implications. Throughout the film, the filmmakers use visual symbolism to heighten this psychological tension and also to mirror Mike's emotional descent. I think a striking example is that cracked window in the room. This recurring image not only foreshadows Mike's eventual attempt to escape, but also symbolizes his fractured reality and state of mind. As Mike's grip on what's real begins to crumble, the cracked glass serves as a visual representation of his unraveling psyche. The room's constant resets and looping events are another powerful metaphor. Just as grief and guilt can trap someone in a cycle of self-punishment, Room 1408 forces Mike to relive the same terrors over and over. Each time he believes he's found an escape, the room pulls him back. It reinforces this idea that emotional pain isn't something we can simply outrun. The monotony of these loops mirrors the inescapable nature of trauma, and it makes the horror deeply personal and relatable for all of us. The room's ever-changing layout, at times expanding, other times closing in on itself, also serves as a metaphor for Mike's psychological state. When the room stretches into impossible spaces, it reflects the overwhelming nature of his emotions. Conversely, the claustrophobic moments echo the suffocating weight of his grief and guilt. And Room 1408 isn't just a physical space. It's a symbolic reflection of Mike's own internal struggle. The room in here doesn't simply torment him with random horrors. It tailors its attacks to his deepest vulnerabilities, particularly his unresolved guilt over his daughter Katie's death. In this way, the room becomes a personification of Mike's own mind, and it forces him to confront the pain he's been trying so hard to suppress. The room's torment often blurs lines between external horror and the internal conflict. When Mike sees visions of Katie or relives moments from his past, the horror is less about the supernatural and more about his inability to move on. This psychological angle deepens the film's impact, transforming the room from a mere antagonist into a manifestation of Mike's emotional scars. Even the room's malevolence can be interpreted symbolically. Its relentless attacks echo the way unresolved trauma can consume us from the inside, leaving us isolated and trapped in our own minds. And the room, now, it doesn't want to kill Mike outright. It wants to break him, to force him to reckon with his pain. And then beneath all of its supernatural surface, 1408 also offers a sharp commentary on emotional isolation and the destructive power of that unresolved trauma. Mike's journey through the room mirrors the human tendency to avoid confronting our deepest fears and feelings. Just as Mike enters the room with an air of detachment, many of us approach our own pain with skepticism, unwilling to face it head on. The film explores how grief can isolate us from others. Mike's estranged relationship with his ex-wife and his refusal to form meaningful connections with others highlight the way trauma can create emotional barriers. By trapping him in room 1408, the film forces Mike into a confrontation, not only with his pain, but also with the consequences of his emotional withdrawal. Another layer of the film's social commentary lies in its depiction of the cyclical nature of trauma. The room's looping events serve as a metaphor for how unresolved pain can replay endlessly in our minds, making true healing seem impossible. The film suggests that confronting this pain, though terrifying, is the only path to liberation, even if the outcome is uncertain. Ultimately, 1408 uses its symbolism and subtext to elevate its narrative, again from that simple haunted room story to that more profound exploration of the human condition. The cracked window, the looping events, and the malevolent room aren't just tools for scares. They're reflections of Mike's internal struggle and the universal truths about grief and guilt. And by the end of the film, whether Mike has truly escaped or not, one thing is clear. The room's power lies not in its supernatural horrors, but in its ability to force its victims to face themselves. This chilling and thought-provoking message is what makes it resonate on a deeply emotional level. It leaves us haunted, not just by the room, but by its implications for our own lives. Now, 1408 also masterfully manipulates its pacing and plot structure to create an experience that's just about as unsettling as the room itself. From its slow, methodical buildup to its chaotic and disorienting descent into terror, the film really mirrors Mike's unraveling state of mind, and it pulls us into his psychological nightmare. The film's first act exemplifies a slow burn approach to building tension. We're introduced to Mike as a jaded skeptic who dismisses the supernatural and approaches his work with detached sarcasm. It's this setup that allows us to settle into his perspective, adopting his cynicism as he hears ominous warnings about the room from Samuel L. Jackson's Gerald Olin. This deliberate pacing is essential for establishing the stakes of the film. By the time Mike enters the room, we've been primed with a mix of dread and curiosity. The seemingly ordinary room, devoid of any immediate danger, heightens the suspense. There's this unshakable feeling that something's wrong, even if we can't pinpoint it yet. This restrained beginning contrasts really sharply with the chaos that follows, making the eventual descent into all of the horror even more impactful. Now, once Mike crosses the threshold into room 1408, the pacing shifts dramatically. Now, the room doesn't assault him all at once. Instead, it begins with small, disquieting occurrences. A clock radio suddenly turning on, a door refusing to open. And these moments are subtle, but they're very effective. They're reflecting the psychological games that the room has been known for. As the terror escalates, the pacing becomes more erratic, and it mirrors Mike's growing instability. Time dilates and contracts. The room manipulates space and reality, leaving both us and Mike disoriented. Moments of calm are abruptly shattered by shocking twists, such as the haunting appearance of his deceased daughter or the cruel cyclical resets of his nightmare. This unpredictability also keeps us on edge. We're unable to anticipate what horror might come next. And the film's twists aren't merely shocking, they're deeply tied to the story's psychological themes. One example, the false escape sequence, where Mike appears to have left the room only to realize he's still trapped, it underscores the inescapable nature of his guilt and grief. These twists serve to deepen the emotional impact of the horror and make it as much about Mike's internal struggles as those supernatural forces that are at play. Another great strength of the film is its ability to keep us guessing. Each of the twists, whether that being the room manipulating time, the room summoning grotesque apparitions, or just warping Mike's perception of reality, they feel both surprising but inevitable, like you knew something was going to happen, but they surprise you anyways. And these moments are carefully placed. They create a rhythm of tension and release that really sustains the film's momentum. The room's psychological attacks, they're as varied as they are relentless. They range from personal torment, like the video of his family, to outright surreal horrors, like that freezing blizzard that overtakes the room. This variety really ensures that the plot always remains engaging, with each twist adding new layers of complexity to the narrative. And the film's conclusion is pure psychological horror. It leaves us with more questions than answers. Whether Mike truly escapes or remains trapped in purgatory of his own making is deliberately unclear. This lack of a resolution, though, is not a flaw. It's actually a feature. It forces us to grapple with our own interpretation of the story. We get to decide where we think it happens or what we think happens next. For some, the ending might represent Mike's liberation, both physically from the room and emotionally from his grief. For others, it could signify his ultimate defeat, with the room consuming him entirely. This ambiguity is a hallmark of great psychological horror, and it ensures that the film will stay with us long after we've left the theater or turned the lights back on. Because let's face it, we're probably watching it streaming like I did. So the pacing and the plot structure aren't just tools for storytelling, they're really integral to the film's impact. By beginning with a slow, deliberate build-up and transitioning into a chaotic whirlwind of terror, the film mirrors the progression of Mike's emotional journey. Each twist in turn, each unpredictable shift in tempo, serves to disorient, unsettle, and ultimately immerse us in the same relentless dread that is consuming Mike. In the end, though, the film's pacing and plot structure, they leave us in the same position. As Mike, we are questioning what's real. We're grappling with unresolved fears and kind of trapped in the cyclical nature of this trauma. It's a storytelling approach that makes 1408 not just a horror film, but like an experience that kind of stays with you, maybe just in the darkest corners of your mind. Now, I think 1408 stands really as a pretty great entry in the realm of psychological horror. It's carved a niche for itself in a genre that's often dominated by slasher tropes and jump scares, and its impact extends beyond the screen. I think it's influenced how horror can be approached in a more cerebral and emotionally profound way. With its deep exploration of grief and guilt in the human mind, I think the film will continue to resonate with audiences and filmmakers alike. Now, in a landscape flooded with supernatural thrillers and gore-driven narratives, 1408 stands out as a testament to just how powerful psychological horror can be. Unlike many other films in that genre that rely on those cheap scares and visual shocks, 1408 gives us more of an emotional and mental turmoil of its protagonist, using his own psychological unraveling as the main source of terror. This distinction places it in that rarefied category of horror films that don't just aim to frighten, but also to provoke thought and reflection. And the film's focus on the emotional depth and the psychological manipulation is a hallmark of Stephen King's work. And I think 1408 is a rare King adaptation that maybe truly captures this essence. King often explores the fragility of the human mind, consequences of trauma, and the haunting presence of past regrets. And 1408 remains one of the most faithful translations of this theme to the screen, where the room itself becomes an embodiment of the protagonist's guilt and grief. think the psychological focus makes it stand out, and especially when a lot of horror prioritizes the physical horror over the emotional complexity. And I think 1408 did a lot to influence the subsequent horror films by showing the tension, atmosphere, and psychological manipulation could be so terrifying, more so than a monster or a slasher villain. I think it proved that a haunting can be more about what's inside your mind than what's in the shadows. And it kind of could be looked at as the start of the shifting approach that has been seen in a range of later films. Because what came next, the Conjuring franchise and films like The Babadook, where emotional subtext and character development play a far more critical role in creating this lasting horror. Now, when it was first released, it was met with the generally positive reception, particularly its focus on psychological depth and its ability to just disturb without resorting to any real cheap tricks. Critics praised John Cusack, many noting how he brought a complex, multifaceted character to life. His performance grounded the horror in reality, and it made his emotional collapse feel even more impactful. The Room, while a physical antagonist, was just as terrifying because it relentlessly forced Mike to confront his own unresolved trauma, making his descent into madness believable and even more tragic. Now, while many lauded the film for its psychological intensity, the film's ambiguous ending became a point of contention. Some critics felt that the unresolved conclusion, leaving us unsure of what really happens to Mike in the end, was a brilliant subversion of expectations, fitting perfectly with the film's explorations of grief and the unknowability of the human mind. Others, however, though, found this ambiguity frustrating, desiring a clearer resolution to the narrative. I think this divide in reception speaks to the film's deeper thematic elements, like the uncertainty of trauma, the distortion of reality, and the inescapability of past pain. For fans of Stephen King's work, though, 1408 was an especially compelling offering. They appreciated the way it captured the essence of King's storytelling style, blending the supernatural with the deeply personal. The horror wasn't simply about the room or its supernatural forces. It was all about those emotional scars that continued to torment Mike. And this exploration of personal suffering really struck a chord with some viewers who were seeking a more cerebral and introspective brand of horror. While 1408 never really achieved much mainstream recognition that some of the more prominent Stephen King adaptations did, like The Shining and Misery, it has earned a devoted following. And the following is a testament to the film's lasting impact. Its atmospheric tension, the psychological complexity, and the emotional resonance continue to attract viewers who appreciate slower, more thoughtful forms of horror. And the film's ability to weave that personal trauma into a supernatural presence or premise has made it stand out as one of King's more emotionally resonant adaptations. It's a film that sticks with viewers, not because of the scares it provides, but because of those emotional and psychological journeys it forces us to undergo. Its blend of supernatural and human struggles make it a film that's not easily forgotten. And it leaves us with an unsettling feeling that I think stays. Over the years, I think 1408 has come to represent a different kind of horror, one that values atmosphere and emotional exploration as much as it does fear. For those who appreciate a more nuanced, introspective approach, well, 1408 is a standout example of the genre's potential to push beyond the surface level scares and deliver something profound. 1408 then stands as a testament to the power of psychological horror done right. It balances supernatural terror with a deep emotional core. Its place in the genre is secure as far as I'm concerned, earning it both critical acclaim and a dedicated fan base, and it continues to influence filmmakers who are seeking to craft horror that's emotionally resonant and terrifying. Now, as we're getting close to the conclusion of our exploration of the film, I think it's pretty clear that it stands as a unique and influential entry in the realm of psychological horror. Now, I know it doesn't have the mass appeal of some of the genre's most famous films, but it offers something that is just as valuable. A haunting and emotionally charged experience that stays with you. In the way it blends the supernatural tension with deeply human emotional struggles, I think that makes it stand out, and its impact on the genre is undeniable. Alright, so now the part where I tell you what I think. For me, 1408 succeeds because it knows how to balance the scares with the emotional. It weaves together the supernatural and real-world trauma in a way that few films ever attempt. Rather than relying on cheap jump scares or gore to get our attention, the film challenges us to confront the most terrifying aspects of the human experience. That's the grief, the guilt, and the fragile human mind. By doing this, 1408 taps into a primal fear, and it's universally relatable, which I think is why it still resonates so strongly even today. The film does an amazing job building tension, not through shock value, but through a slow burn that lingers. As Mike grapples with his personal demons, we're drawn into this unraveling. The room becomes more than a supernatural antagonist. It becomes a reflection of his own inner turmoil, his refusal to face his past, and his inability to move forward. This emotional depth sets 1408 apart from its peers and makes it a real standout in the genre. Now for some strengths and weaknesses. First and foremost, I think the film's biggest strength is John Cusack's performance. His portrayal of Mike is layered and nuanced. He brings a depth to what could have been a very one-note skeptic. Cusack's journey from that jaded cynicism to a broken man confronting his unresolved grief is both heartbreaking and terrifying. His vulnerability and emotional rawness provide a powerful anchor for the story, and it allows us to empathize with his torment, even as he becomes more ensnared in these malevolent forces of the room. And I think the room itself is another standout element. Its design and unpredictable nature add to its oppressive, suffocating presence. It's not just a setting, but an active participant in the horror. An antagonist that knows Mike better than he knows himself. I think this malevolence is chilling in its subtlety. It doesn't need to rely on the overt supernatural threats, because it uses Mike's own mind as a weapon against him. And this makes the room's psychological manipulation feel more real and more terrifying. Additionally, the film has some amazing emotional depth and remarkable strength. By focusing on Mike's grief over the death of his daughter, the film adds layers of psychological complexity that elevate it beyond typical horror fare. The room's haunting is not just supernatural, but a representation of Mike's inability to move past his trauma. And it makes every moment in the room emotionally charged and deeply, deeply personal. Now, while 1408 excels in many areas, it's not without its flaws. Some viewers may find the pacing uneven. The first half, really, of the film builds tension at a deliberate pace, and that may feel slow to some, especially as the film's supernatural elements don't fully reveal themselves until later. However, I do think that this slow burn approach is deliberate, designed to unsettle us and allow for a deeper connection with Mike. Still, those looking for that faster-paced horror film may find the build-up frustrating. And the film's ending, which leaves some ambiguity about whether Mike escapes the room or remains trapped in his personal hell, has proven to be a divisive point. While many fans, like myself, really appreciate the open-ended nature of the conclusion, I view it as a fitting reflection of the film's themes and the unresolved trauma and the uncertainty of the human mind. Others, though, find it unsatisfying. Wanting a clearer resolution couldn't maybe provide closure for those who seek definitive answers in their narratives. Ultimately, though, 1408 for me earns a solid 7.5 out of 10. While its pacing may not be for everyone, and for me it is a little hit or miss. It got a little too jerky in the hotel room with the speed up, slow down. But the ending ambiguity may frustrate some, not me, but some can find that a little frustrating, a little irritating. The film's strengths, though, the emotional depth, the psychological horror, and the performances, specifically of John Cusack, make it a standout. The film's ability to weave together terror and emotion left a lasting impression on me, and it's clear that its psychological complexity is one of the reasons it's remained beloved film for other horror fans. So my recommendation: if you're someone who enjoys horror films that challenge your perception of reality, then 1408 is a must-see. This is a film that isn't just interested in scaring you. It wants to make you think, to dive into the dark recesses of the human mind, and explore the complexities of grief, guilt, and trauma. The psychological manipulation and emotional depth will leave you questioning the nature of reality. And for those who love films that rely on atmosphere and character development over cheap thrills, 1408 provides a rich, unsettling experience that is sure to resonate. While it's not a conventional horror film, its haunting exploration of the human psyche makes it a fascinating and rewarding watch for those who appreciate a deeper, more introspective form of horror. So if you haven't seen it yet, and you're ready for a film that'll mess with your mind and emotions, I think 1408 is definitely worth checking out. And as always, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Real Talk Horror Edition. It has been an absolute pleasure diving into the psychological depths of 1408 with you, and I hope you've enjoyed this deep exploration into his grief, guilt, and the horrors that lie within the mind. If you found this episode insightful or chilling or maybe a little of both, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. While you're at it, leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform to let us know what you think. Your feedback means the world and helps me continue bringing you the best in horror film analysis. And don't forget to join the conversation on social media. Follow us on Twitter at RealTalkPod. I guess they call it X now. I'm there occasionally. More often, you'll find me on Instagram or Threads, occasionally on Blue Sky, at RealTalk. Or you can email me, therealrealtalk@gmail.com. Share your thoughts on 1408 or any other films we cover. If you've seen the movie, what do you think about the ending? Was it satisfying, or did it leave you craving more answers? I'd love to hear from you and keep the conversation going with fellow horror fans. Next week, though, we're wrapping up the psychological horror series we've been doing, and it's the last film in our trauma and transformation category with a twist, literally. We'll be taking on the British horror comedy from 2006, Severance. If you think psychological horror is all dark and brooding, wait until you see what happens when workplace horror meets comedy. It's a perfect blend of twisted humor and terror that you won't want to miss. But until then, stay spooky and keep embracing those dark corners of the mind. Remember, sometimes the scariest things aren't what we see, but what we feel. We'll talk to you next time on Real Talk Horror Edition.
Creeping through the silence dark, whispers in the midnight park. The night is cold, there's no escape. Ghostly figures take their shape. Shadows play a twisted game. Fear and terror stake their claim. Footsteps follow close behind. Haunting thoughts invade your mind. Run away, but they won't go. In the darkness, fear will grow. Midnight shadow Metal doors they creak, ghostly whispers start to speak. Every corner hides a fear. Close your eyes, they're drawing near. Candles flicker, spirits call. In the night they'll take it all. Midnight strikes, the clocks rewind. Nightmares now are intertwined. They're away, but they won't go. In the darkness, fear will glow. Midnight shadows come to play. In your dreams they'll